For 40 years, he mistook my presence for devotion. He thought my silence was acceptance. So I stayed. I stayed in our La Jolla condo. I poured his coffee, and I smiled. He didn't know that in a digitally connected city, an invisible old woman can become a ghost in her own home. And this morning, while he read his financial paper, I began the final quiet act of erasing him. The 8 a.m. marine layer was thick. It pressed white and silent against the floor-to-ceiling glass of our La Jolla condo. The ocean below was just a sound, a faint hiss, but the water itself was gone, hidden by the gray. Richard sat at the head of the dark wood table. His focus was absolute. He was reading the pale pink sheets of his financial paper. He folded the main section with a sharp, decisive crack. The sound cut the quiet. He had been reading for 45 minutes. He had not looked up at me. I smelled the bitter, dark roast from his cup. His third. My own cup of tea sat untouched, cooling. I preferred to wait. He rustled the paper. "Eleanor, love," he said. The words were automatic, learned from decades of repetition. "Is there more sweetener?" His eyes stayed on the stock tickers. I looked at the small, white ceramic bowl. It was full of the little yellow packets he used. The bowl sat exactly where it always sat, 6 inches from his right hand. I did not speak. I picked up the heavy bowl. I placed it directly beside his cup, touching the porcelain saucer. "Thank you, dear," he murmured. He tore a packet and poured the yellow powder. He spooned 2 more heaps of regular sugar from the matching sugar bowl. Clink, clink, clink went his spoon against the mug. He sipped, and his gaze never left the page. He believed my life moved around his, that my only purpose was to support his schedule, his home, his needs. He believed my days were managed by simple lists I wrote on paper notepads: groceries, dry cleaning, book dentist for Richard, call the pool service. In a way, he was right. I am a creature of lists. He just did not know about the other list. The one I kept on a different device. The one I had been building for 3 years. Ever since the day I found the receipts from his business trip to Scottsdale. This morning, while he was in the shower, the water drumming loud against the heavy glass, I was in the study. His study. I had pressed my thumb to the small, cold scanner on the side of his personal laptop. He had programmed it to accept his own print, and, in a moment of condescending practicality, mine. "So you can book my travel, love," he had said 6 years ago. He thought I used it to check airline prices. This morning, I used it to open his private ledger. The digital file was protected. His password was the name of the boat he owned in 1998, the one he sold right after he told me he was ending his first affair. He never knew I knew about that boat, or that woman. I copied the last 5 years of that ledger onto a small, gray USB drive. The drive was now in my coat pocket. Then, I attached the file to a scheduled email, an email addressed to my lawyer. It was time to send at 1:25 p.m. Back at the breakfast table, Richard turned the page. Another sharp crack of the paper. He took a long sip of his sweetened coffee. He had no idea. This wasn't just about the money or the other women. This was about San Marcos. This was about the house with the rose bushes I never wanted. He was building his career. I was building our family. And he let me know, in 1,000 quiet ways, that my work did not count. He missed dinners. He worked late. He looked straight through me when I tried to talk about our son's trouble in school. It wasn't one single sharp act. It was a slow, steady withdrawal. He just became less present, year after year. I learned to be quiet. I learned to be visible and forgettable at the same time. He thought my silence was acceptance. He mistook my presence for devotion. He did not know that my silence was a shield. He did not know that his comfort, this rigid routine, this absolute belief in his own importance, it was the doorway to his collapse. He sighed, finally folding the paper and placing it on the table. He pulled his phone toward him, tapping the dark screen. "Right," he said, more to the phone than to me. "Busy day. I've got a conference call at 9. "Of course, dear," I said. I stood up and collected his heavy mug. I took it to the kitchen. The stone counters were cold. My own phone was on the counter, hidden under the paper grocery list. I glanced at the time. 8:15 a.m. The first transfer, the largest one, was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. I had 7 hours until my flight. I had 15 minutes until the first wire. I turned on the water and rinsed his cup. The work was just beginning. I stood in the kitchen and finished rinsing his mug. The stone counter was cold beneath my palms. I dried the mug with a soft cloth and placed it back on its shelf. I looked at the clock on the microwave oven. The green numbers flipped. 8:30 a.m. I slipped my hand into the deep pocket of my apron. My fingers found the small black phone I bought with cash 6 months ago. I did not pull it out. I just pressed the side button through the fabric. I felt the single vibration. A moment later, I felt a second one, the bank notification. The first transfer, the largest one, was complete. The money was moving. My hand was perfectly steady. From the living room, Richard's voice suddenly boomed. "Eleanor, I'm on my call. Keep it down in there." I had been standing still. The only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I was making no noise at all. "Yes, dear," I said to the empty kitchen. I dried my hands on the cloth. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway. The carpet was thick, silencing my steps. I passed our bedroom. My large, obvious suitcase was there, sitting by the dresser. It was packed with the clothes he would expect me to pack. Sweaters, sensible shoes, the things an old woman takes on a trip. I went to the room at the end of the hall, the guest room. Years ago, I told him I wanted a craft room. He laughed. He said, "Whatever keeps you busy, love." He had not set foot in this room in at least a decade. The room smelled of old paper and dust. I opened the closet. Inside were plastic bins of yarn, empty sewing boxes, and old patterns. I reached behind a tall stack of bins. I pulled out a simple black canvas carry-on bag. It was small. It was the sort of bag no one ever notices at an airport. I placed it on the cutting table. I opened a desk drawer. First, I took out the gray USB drive from this morning. I put it in a small, zippered pocket. Next, I took 2 black external hard drives. They were small but felt heavy in my hand. They held everything. The scanned documents from his private safe. The audio files I recorded of his phone calls with his lawyers. I unplugged the small black phone from its charger and a portable battery pack. I added a small leather-bound book. It held the account numbers, the passwords, and the names. I zipped each item into its own place. The bag was organized. It was ready. I looked at the bag. This was not just about his money. This was about the 30 years I spent managing his social life, his home, and his family. The down payment on the small bookshop I wanted to open in 1993, the one he called a silly little hobby, was in this bag. The cost of every dinner party I hosted for his clients was in this bag. The cost of every night I waited up for a man who was not coming home was in this bag. The intercom on the wall buzzed. A harsh electronic sound. It was Richard calling from his study down the hall. "Eleanor, could you bring me another coffee? This call is dragging on." I took a breath. I zipped the main compartment of the black bag. I pushed it back into the closet, deep behind the sewing boxes. I replaced the empty bins in front of it. I walked back to the kitchen. I spooned fresh, dark beans into the grinder. I pressed the button. The loud, high-pitched whir of the grinder filled the apartment. I let it run for a long time. I brewed the coffee. I poured it into his favorite mug, the oversized blue one. I carried it to his study. I opened the heavy door without knocking. He was at his massive desk, his back to me. He was laughing, talking loudly to the speakerphone. "Absolutely, Jim," he said. "We'll hammer them in the third quarter." I walked across the thick rug. I placed the hot mug on the leather coaster by his right hand. He did not turn. He simply waved his left hand backward, a small flick of the wrist. A gesture of dismissal, or maybe thanks. It did not matter. I turned and walked out. I closed the door. I heard the quiet, solid click of the latch. I was in the master bedroom, standing in the gray morning light. My large beige suitcase was open on the bed. This was the decoy bag. I took one of Richard's heavy wool sweaters from his dresser drawer. It was dark blue. He loved this sweater. I folded it with care, making sure the creases were perfect. I laid it inside the suitcase on top of 3 of my own blouses. The blouses were sensible, beige and gray. They were the clothes of the woman he expected me to be. My performance had to be complete, down to the last detail. As I reached for a pair of his socks, my personal phone vibrated on the nightstand. Not the black phone, but my real one, the one he knew about. The screen lit up with a picture of my son, David. He was smiling, standing with his own wife and daughter. I sat on the edge of the bed. I touched the screen. "David," I said. "How lovely to hear your voice." "Hey, Mom." His voice was warm but distant, coming from his home in Oregon. "Just calling to check in. How are things?" "Everything is fine, dear," I said. I smoothed the wool sweater in the suitcase. "We're just having a quiet morning. Your father is on a conference call." "Always on a call," David said. He did not sound angry. He just sounded tired. It was an old, settled fact for him. "Are you two all set for the trip?" "Almost," I said. "I'm packing our bags right now." This was the story I had told him. I had told everyone that I was surprising Richard with a trip to Cabo, a second or third or 10th honeymoon, a chance to reconnect. Richard had seen the fake booking confirmation on my iPad weeks ago. He had grumbled, "Cabo? In the third quarter? It's terribly inconvenient, Eleanor." But he accepted it. He assumed it was just another part of the comfortable life I managed for him. "That's good, Mom," David said. "You both deserve a break. Really, you do." A memory came to me. It was not gentle. It was sharp, and it had hard edges. It was from the house in San Marcos. David was 15. I had found a small, clear plastic bag in his backpack. It held 3 white pills. I see the den in that house. The walls were cheap, dark wood paneling. Richard was at his desk. The phone was pressed to his ear. I stood in the doorway. My hand was shaking. I was holding the small plastic bag between my thumb and forefinger. He saw me. He looked at my face, then at my hand. He saw the bag. He did not put the phone down. He held up one finger. "Wait." Then he turned his chair, facing away from me. He laughed into the phone. "No, Jim, the numbers are solid. We're going to push it through." I waited. I stood there for 5 minutes, holding those pills. When he finally hung up, he turned his chair. He sighed. "What is it, Eleanor?" "I'm in the middle of something." "Richard," I said. My voice was thin. "It's David. I found this." In his backpack. He looked at the bag. He did not get up. He did not ask to see it. "He's being a stupid kid," he said. He picked up a pen and tapped it on his desk. "Take it away from him. He needs to learn." "I'm busy." He turned back to his desk. He picked up the phone again. I was left standing in the doorway. I was holding the pills. I was completely alone. I was the only parent in the house. David's voice pulled me back. "Mom, you still there? You went quiet." "Yes, dear. I'm here." I looked at the dark blue sweater in the suitcase. "I was just thinking about that old house in San Marcos." "God, that place," he said. "Weird you brought that up. I had a dream about it last week. You always hated those rose bushes." "Yes," I said. "I did." "Well, have a great time in Cabo. Send me a picture from the beach, okay?" "I will, David. I love you." "Love you too, Mom." The line clicked. I placed the phone back on the nightstand. I looked at the open suitcase. It was a prop. It was a piece of scenery for a play that only I had read. I closed the suitcase. I heard the click of the latches. I zipped the nylon expansion. I would leave it here, by the door, for him to find. I checked my watch. The numbers read 10:17 a.m. The next wire transfer, the one from our joint brokerage account, was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. I walked out of the bedroom, leaving the packed bag behind. I needed to be in the study when that transfer happened. I needed to use his computer one last time to make sure the final trigger was set. I walked down the hall to the study. The thick carpet absorbed the sound of my steps. I could hear Richard's voice. He was in the living room now, pacing. His voice was a low, confident rumble aimed at the speaker on his phone. He was selling something. He was always selling. I stopped at the study door. The clock on the hall table showed 10:27 a.m. I had 3 minutes. I reached into my apron pocket and my fingers closed around 2 items. The first was the small cold key. The second was the red USB drive. I pushed open the heavy study door. The room was empty. It smelled of leather and his faint, citrusy cologne. His desk was massive, a slab of dark wood. His laptop was closed. His high-backed leather chair was pushed in. He had not seen me. I heard his voice from the living room, fading as he walked toward the balcony. "The projections are conservative, Jim. I guarantee it." I went to the desk. I did not sit. I pulled the small key from my pocket. On the right side of the desk, there was a shallow drawer. It was the only one he kept locked. He thought I did not have a key. He did not know I had made a copy from the original 5 years ago when he sent me to the hardware store to get his house keys duplicated. I slid the key into the lock. It made a tiny click. I pulled the drawer open. It moved smoothly on its metal runners. Inside, things were very neat. There was his old expired passport. There were 2 checkbooks for accounts he thought I did not know about. There was a thin stack of letters, tied with a string, from his first wife. I took the red USB drive from my pocket. This drive was my last gift to him. It did not hold the truth. It held a different story. I had spent 2 weeks creating the files on this drive. It held a modified, simpler version of his ledger. This version showed obvious, clumsy transfers. It showed money moving from his business straight into a new checking account, an account in my name at a local San Diego bank. It was the account of a common, greedy thief. It was the act of an angry, foolish old woman. He would find this drive. He would give it to his lawyers. They would give it to the police. They would all follow this trail. They would find the local account. By then it would be empty. The money would be long gone, moved to Malta, then to cryptocurrency, then scattered into accounts he would never find. This red drive was a distraction. It was a false map. It would make him think I was stupid, and it would make him look like a fool when the trail went cold. I placed the red drive on top of his expired passport. It was bright. He could not miss it. I put my hand on the drawer, ready to close it. I felt a vibration. It came from the black phone in my other pocket. It was not a buzz. It was a single long pulse, the notification I had set. The clock on his desk read 10:30 a.m. The second wire transfer was complete. The joint brokerage account was now empty. I pushed the drawer shut. The lock made a soft, solid thud. I turned to leave the room. Richard was standing in the doorway. He was not on the phone. His arms were crossed. He was looking at me. His eyes were narrow. "Eleanor?" he said. His voice was not loud. It was sharp. "What are you doing in here?" My blood did not run fast. My hands did not shake. I just stood, my back to his desk, the key to his locked drawer heavy in my apron pocket. Richard stayed in the doorway. His arms were tight across his chest. The overhead light caught the gray in his hair. "Well?" he asked. His voice was low. I brought my left hand up to my throat. It was a gesture I had seen other women use when they were flustered. I made my breathing shallow. "Richard," I said. My voice was higher than usual. "You startled me." "My goodness, what were you doing?" he repeated. He did not move. "The passport," I said. I let out a short, nervous laugh. I was looking for your passport." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "For Cabo, dear," I said. I took a step toward him, into the light. I needed him to see my worried face. I was looking at the flight confirmation email, and I suddenly had this terrible thought. I never checked the expiration date on your passport. Can you imagine? If we got all the way to the airport and they turned us away? I stopped a few feet from him. I let the worry sit on my face. He looked at me for a long moment. I could see him processing the information. He was looking for the flaw. Then his shoulders dropped. He let out a loud, impatient sigh. "Eleanor, for God's sake," he said. He finally uncrossed his arms. "My passport is fine. It's in the safe." "Oh," I said. "Well, I just wanted to be sure. I didn't want to bother you while you were..." "Bother me?" He scoffed. "You were in my study, at my desk. You know I don't like you. Organizing, in here. I know, dear. I'm sorry." I looked down at the floor, playing the part of the corrected wife. He ran a hand over his face. He was already thinking about his next call, his next deal. I had become boring to him again. The danger was past. "It's fine," he said. "Just leave it. I'll get the passports tonight before we leave." "Before I leave," I corrected him, just as I had planned. "My flight is at 3:15 p.m. Yours isn't until tomorrow, remember? You said you couldn't get away. This was the lie I had built, that I would fly ahead to get the room ready at the resort, and he would join me a day later." He had agreed instantly. He loved the idea of one more night alone in his own apartment. Right, he said. He stepped back into the hallway, making room for me to leave. "Are you packed?" "My large bag is by the bedroom door," I said. I walked past him, making sure my shoulder did not brush his. "I just need to get my coat and my carry-on." Good. He tapped his phone screen. He was already gone, his mind in the third quarter. "I'll be in the living room. I have to call Jim back." "Of course, dear," I said. I watched him walk down the hall. He did not look back. I turned and went the other way. I went to the guest room at the end of the hall. I closed the door. The click of the latch was very quiet, but it sounded final. I walked to the closet. I moved the plastic sewing bins. They were light. They were empty. I pulled the black canvas carry-on bag from the shadows. I set it on the craft table. I opened the main compartment. Everything was there. The hard drives, the USB drive, the small leather-bound book. I took the small black phone from my apron pocket. I unplugged it from the portable battery pack it had been attached to. I checked the screen. The time was 11:58 a.m. I had set 3 major transfers. The first at 8:30 a.m. took the liquid cash. The second at 10:30 a.m. emptied the joint brokerage account. This last one at 12 p.m. was the most important. It was the one I had set up through his own laptop. It was scheduled to drain his private reserve, the one he kept separate from me, the one he used for Scottsdale and for other things. I stood in the quiet room. I held the black phone in my hand. I stared at the dark screen. 1:59 a.m. I waited. The apartment was completely silent. I could not hear Richard's voice. I could not hear the ocean. My hand was steady. I waited for the final signal. The phone in my hand vibrated. It was not a buzz. It was a single, long pulse. 10 p.m. The last transfer was complete. His private reserve, the one he used for his trips and secrets, was gone. All of it. I let out a breath. I had not realized I was holding it. I placed the black phone into the canvas carry-on bag. I added the portable battery pack. I took my regular wallet, my regular phone, and my house keys from my apron pocket. I put them in the bag as well. I did not need the keys, but I liked the feel of them. Heavy in my hand, one last time. I took off the apron. I folded it and left it on the craft table. I zipped the black bag. It was not heavy. It was compact. I put the strap over my shoulder. I walked to the closet and took out a plain gray coat. It was the coat of an invisible woman. I slipped it on. The weight was familiar. I opened the guest room door. I walked back into the long hallway. The apartment was quiet again. I could hear the faint sound of the ocean. The marine layer must have been breaking up. I passed the study. The door was open. His leather chair was empty. I passed our bedroom. The door was open. I saw the large beige suitcase, my decoy, standing by the dresser. It was a perfect prop, waiting for a scene that would never happen. I walked to the front entryway. The floor here was hardwood, not carpet. Richard was in the living room. He was standing on the balcony, his back to me. The heavy glass door was slid open just a few inches. The sea air was mixing with the smell of old coffee in the room. He was on the phone. His voice was animated, happy. "It's a done deal, Jim," he said. He laughed. "By the time they even realize what we've done, well, let's just say we'll be celebrating." I stood in the entryway. I put my black bag down on the floor. I waited. He did not turn around. He was looking out at the newly visible bright blue line of the horizon. I reached for the front door. My hand stopped. I had to be certain. I turned back. I took 3 steps onto the hardwood. My sensible shoes made a tap, tap, tap. A small, sharp sound. Richard heard it. He did not turn. He just covered the phone's receiver with his hand. "Is that you?" he called out, his voice loud, aimed toward the entryway. Are you leaving for the airport now? Yes, dear, I said. My voice was calm. It was clear. My car is waiting downstairs. I had booked the rideshare at 11:45 a.m. It was scheduled for a 12:15 p.m. pickup. All right, love. He sounded impatient. Have a safe flight. Don't buy out the whole resort before I get there. He laughed his dry, scratchy laugh. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, I said. Tomorrow. He took his hand off the phone. Sorry, Jim, he said, his voice instantly returning to business. Now, about that third quarter projection, I looked at his back. He was wearing a dark blue shirt. He was a strong, solid shape against the bright glass. He had no idea. He was a man standing on a dock, watching his own ship sail away, and he thought it was just a part of the view. I turned. I walked back to the front door. My hand closed around the cold, smooth metal door handle. I pulled it open. The air from the building's hallway was cool. I stepped out. I put my black bag on the floor and stepped fully onto the carpeted hall. I did not look back. I reached for the door and pulled it closed. It made a heavy, solid thud as it shut. I heard the final, soft click of the lock engaging. I was outside. I picked up my bag. I put the strap on my shoulder. I turned and walked toward the red exit sign to the elevators. The rideshare was a black sedan, quiet and clean. The driver did not speak. He just put my small canvas bag in the trunk. I sat in the back, on the cool leather seat. The car pulled away from the curb. I did not turn to look at the tall glass building. I looked forward through the front windshield. We drove through La Jolla. The streets were bright. The sun was high. The ocean was a deep, flat blue. The city was beautiful, and I felt no connection to it. I took the black phone from my pocket. It was off. I kept it off. I took my regular phone, the one Richard knew, and checked the time. 12:43 p.m. We arrived at San Diego International. The driver took my bag from the trunk and set it on the sidewalk. I gave him a cash tip. He nodded, got back in his car, and drove away. I was just another woman in a gray coat with a small bag. The airport was busy. People were rushing. People were on their phones, looking stressed. I was not stressed. I moved slowly. I went to the international terminal. I had no bags to check. I had already checked in online from the guest room 2 days ago. I went to the security line. I placed my black carry-on in a gray bin. I put my coat in another. I walked through the scanner. It did not beep. I watched my bag come out of the X-ray machine. It was just a dark shape on the security guard's screen. A laptop, a battery pack, some hard drives. Normal things. The guard was looking at the screen, but his eyes were tired. He waved the bag through. I collected my things. I put my coat back on. I put the strap of my bag on my shoulder. I found my gate. It was in a quiet corner of the terminal. I sat in a hard plastic chair facing the window. Outside, a large plane was being loaded with bags. My plane. I checked my phone. 1:03 p.m. As I looked at the screen, it lit up. The name Richard filled the screen. A call. I did not answer. I did not silence it. I just held the phone in my hand and watched his name. It rang and rang. Then the screen went dark. A moment later, it vibrated. A text message Bank of America just called about the brokerage account. Call me, I read the words. I did nothing. The phone lit up again. Richard, he was calling back immediately. I pressed the button on the side. The call was silenced. It went to voicemail. Another text appeared. Eleanor? I watched the screen. This is not a joke. Call me now. I could see him. I could see him in the study, his face red, pacing on the thick carpet. He would be furious. But more than that, he would be confused. He would be off balance. Another text. Where is the money? The next call came. I silenced it. Another text. What did you do? I read the capital letters. A voice came over the airport speaker system. We are now ready to begin boarding Flight 117 with service to Lisbon. I looked up. The gate agents were smiling, ready. I stood up. I held my regular phone in my hand. I pressed and held the side button. The screen asked me if I wanted to power down. I pressed the button. The screen went black. I opened my black carry-on bag. I placed the dead phone inside, next to the hard drives. I zipped the bag closed. I took my passport from my coat pocket. I walked to the boarding line. I was in the first group. The gate agent took my passport. She smiled. "Have a wonderful flight, Ms. Vance." I nodded. She handed the passport back to me. I turned. I walked down the jet bridge. The floor was carpeted, and my steps were silent. The long tunnel was quiet. At the end, I could see the open door of the plane. I could see the light inside. I did not think about San Marcos. I did not think about Richard. I thought about the small furnished apartment I had rented in Lisbon. It was on a quiet street. I had seen pictures. It had a window that looked out over a small garden. I stepped out of the tunnel and into the doorway of the plane. I was not running. I was just arriving.